Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Learning Key Signatures. Today, we're going to be learning about enharmonic notes and enharmonic keys. Have you ever wondered why on your fingering chart or on your piano, the diagrams usually skip certain notes? Have you ever wondered why some fingerings have the same fingers to produce two different spellings of notes? Have you ever wondered why some key signatures are extremely uncommon and why some key signatures don't exist at all? Today, you'll learn why. First, we need to visualize the difference between a half step, also known as a semitone, and a whole step, also known as a whole tone. Looking at this diagram of this piano keyboard, you can see that the smallest possible step would be from something like a C to a C sharp, because C is even closer to C sharp than C is to D. Anytime you have the smallest possible increment on a piano, it is called a half step. Even if we go from a black key to a black key, for instance, D flat to E flat, you will notice that there is a little bit of white space in between. And that's because D is closer to D flat than D flat is to E flat. Anytime you go two half steps away, that is the same as a whole step. So from C natural, which is one of the white keys, to D natural, which is another one of the white keys, that is a whole step away. It is not a rule that every time you go from a white key to a white key, it is a whole step away. Look at E and F. There's nothing in between E and F at all, and so the distance between E and F is a half step. There's one more place on the keyboard that happens, and that is between B and C natural. You'll notice there are no black keys there, so it's already a half step away. But usually on the piano, when you are going from a white key to a black key that has the same letter name, it's going to be talking about a half step. This next diagram might scare you at first glance, but after I explain it, it's going to be okay. All of the blue arches represent all of the examples of whole steps. Each little red diamond represents a half step. Notice in particular that between E and F, there is no blue arch, but a red diamond, because the distance between E and F is a half step. Same with between B and C, that is already a half step. For all of our other letters, we need to travel first to a black key to get a half step away. Do you remember the whole step and half step pattern for major scales? No matter what note we start on, it's whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. If you look at the scale on the left, it shows you an example of that. Notice that between E and F, it's already a half step, and between B and C, it's a half step, just like on the piano diagram one slide ago. If we take out all of the whole steps and replace them with these notes, you will notice a pattern. Anytime you go up a half step, it keeps the same name, but it adds a sharp. Anytime you go down a half step, it keeps the same name, but it adds a flat. This means that technically, C sharp and D flat are exactly the same. You notice how one is not higher or lower than the other? When they are identical, meaning they sound the same and they're performed exactly the same way, but they're spelled differently, they are called enharmonic tones. So what I want you to take away from this diagram is that enharmonic tones will sound exactly the same as each other, even though they're spelled differently. There are some other enharmonic tones as well. You'll notice from our piano diagram earlier, there were no B sharps, C flats, E sharps, or F flats. And that is because they are extremely uncommon. But here's why. Do you remember how it is already a half step between E and F? That means that if you raise E a half step, it's just going to be F. So that's why instead of writing E sharp, we just write F. Same thing goes for between B and C. If we were to lower C a half step, well, the difference between B and C is already a half step. So if we were to lower that C by a half step by making it C flat, we would just call it B instead. Technically, all of the purple letters are still correct, but the black letters are the more common ones. For our choir friends, this whole and half step pattern works exactly the same way. We do need to learn some new syllables though. On the way up, you basically replace whatever the last letter was in the solfege syllable with the letter I. So do becomes D, and that raises it a half step. Re becomes re, and that raises it a half step. Coming down the chromatic scale, the blue notes, we change the last letter to the letter E. So T becomes te. But we have a problem with re, don't we? It already ends in E. So when we lower re a half step, we have to change it to ra. What about minor scales? It had a different pattern of whole and half steps. Ultimately, that doesn't change very much because we still use the same pattern to replace the notes in between. A sharp is still identical to B flat, and so that is an example of two different enharmonic tones. Again, any time that two notes are identical, they're just spelled differently, they are called enharmonic tones. Same examples from earlier in a different order. Since between B and C it's already a half step, we have some very uncommon enharmonic tones there, and same goes with between E and F. Let's check to make sure that you understand that what we've done so far is sticking in your head. Look on the left side. What is the note that comes between A and B? It has to be a half step higher than A, a half step lower than B in order for it to fit in between there. There are two possible answers. You could have said either A sharp or B flat. What are the enharmonic notes between C and D? Again, just think, what's a half step higher than C or a half step lower than D? C sharp or D flat would be correct answers there. What are the enharmonic tones between F and G? You could have said F sharp or G flat. What are the enharmonic tones that come between D and E? D sharp and E flat. What are the enharmonic tones that come between G and A? They are G sharp and A flat. Please make special note to realize that A sharp and B flat are identical. C sharp and D flat are identical. F sharp and G flat are identical. D sharp and E flat are identical. And G sharp and A flat are identical. That is why when you play them on the piano, they're the same button. And that is why when you look on your fingering chart, those notes have the same fingerings. Pop quiz. Can you name the flat equivalent to all of these sharps? I'll give you a second. What is A sharp the same as? B flat. What is C sharp the same as? D flat. What is F sharp the same as? G flat. What is D sharp the same as? E flat. And what is G sharp the same as? A flat. If you struggled with that, just ask yourself, sharps are going higher, so what is one note higher than that letter? And that will always give you the flat note equivalent. What if I give you the flats? Could you tell me the enharmonic sharps that go with it? So what is G flat the same as? F sharp. What is E flat the same as? D sharp. What is A flat the same as? G sharp. What is B flat the same as? A sharp. And what is D flat the same as? C sharp. If you struggled with coming up with those answers quickly, just ask yourself, since flats are going down, what is the letter that goes below the letter I'm trying to figure out? And that will give you the sharp equivalent. Take a moment to pause this video to memorize these 4 enharmonic tones. They are extremely uncommon, and they are very frustrating when they come up in your music. So if you take a few seconds right now to just memorize these 4 things, it'll be a lot easier for the rest of your musical lives. Now back to key signatures. Here are all of the sharp key signatures that we've already discussed last time. This time, I'm asking you, what is the musical distance, also known as the interval, between these keys every time we add 1 sharp? So if I go from 0 sharps to 1 sharp, by how much does the name change? If I'm going from C major to G major, C, D, E, F, G, that's 5 steps away. Let's see if the pattern continues or changes. If I'm going from G major to D major, how many steps away are they? G, A, B, C, D. That's 5 steps away again. And I'll just give you a shortcut. Anytime you add 1 sharp, the name will change by 5 steps every time, forever. This means that eventually we'll run out of sharps to add and we'll have to do the flat thing. If you go clockwise around this diagram, you will always be adding 1 sharp, which is the same as taking away 1 flat. You'll notice that when we go from 0 sharps to 1 sharp, C, D, E, F, G, it's still 5 steps away. And this will continue all the way around until you get back home to C major. Because if you're comparing F major to C major, which has 1 flat, and you're going to 0 flats, it's F, G, A, B, C, still 5 steps away. Let's talk about flat keys now. If I add a flat to a key signature, by how many steps does its name change? Let's look at the first 2. If I'm going from 1 flat to 2 flats, that'll be from F to B flat. How many steps away is that? Well, F, G, A, B flat. That's 4 away. What about if I go from B flat to E flat? B flat, C, D, E flat. Again, that's 4 steps away. So it seems to be that when we add a flat, it's the opposite of when we add a sharp. Each time I add a flat, the name changes by 4 steps. This creates the circle of fourths. which is exactly the same as the diagram we just looked at, except backwards. This time, we're moving counterclockwise, also known as adding flats, which is the same as taking away sharps. This is called the circle of fourths because every time you go around the circle, the name changes by 4 steps. Why is it intelligent to practice your scales in the circle of fifths or the circle of fourths instead of practicing them randomly? How can you use the circle of fifths or the circle of fourths to create your own songs with harmonic motion? How does practicing your chromatic scales help you understand music theory much faster? After all, a chromatic scale is just a bunch of half steps, which is all we've talked about today. Congratulations! Now you understand all of the harmonic notes. If you take a quick look at the bottom of this diagram, you'll notice that C flat is the same as B, and C sharp is the same as D flat, and also G flat is the same as F sharp. So not only does that apply to individual notes that you play on your instrument or sing, it also applies to entire key signatures, meaning that the key of G flat will sound exactly identical to the key of F sharp. I also threw the minor scales on the inside of this circle, just in case you were curious about how moving around the circle of fourths and the circle of fifths would work with that. Thank you very much for joining us again for Key Signatures. Have an absolutely fabulous day.